Okay.
Okay, we've got a couple of people joining us. Yes, there's quite a few popping on now, which is wonderful.
Lovely. And people are
Excellent.
recording. It's recording already. It said it's recording. So there
Oh,
you go.
wonderful.
There you go.
Excellent, because I'm sure that many of our members that don't have the opportunity to join us today, Linda, will want to jump on and have a look at it. So
Oh, well, we'll see what happens. Would be nice.
wonderful. All right. So welcome to everyone who's joined us. My name's Bobbi Reilly. I'm one of the co-directors of Global Training and Professional Development. Thank you for joining us on our Lunch and Learn series. It's a series that we have tried to put together to just bring interesting people into the fold and get to know them a little bit better and what it is that they do. And today I've actually got one of my co-directors with me, Linda. As many of you will know, Linda was recently awarded the AM, which is a member of the Order of Australia. And Linda got it for a significant service to the law, particularly dispute resolution and to tertiary education, which I think is fantastic. Linda, you must be so proud that you've been recognised for everything that you've done within our community, within our profession.
A little surprise. Can I put that before being proud? But yes, it's been a wonderful experience, but a big surprise. I must be honest. But I am pleased that dispute resolution has started to come into be known as a profession or industry that way. So I am pleased that I can promote us.
Yeah.
So yeah.
And I think for me, Linda, I still see us as a profession that is still growing. I don't think we're quite there yet. And I know you've been in the industry for 30 odd years now.
31,
Yep.
31.
And I think, like, even to think about that, you were obviously in right at the very beginning, and it's still not even fully established yet. So to be recognised for the transition and what you've done to help us to move forward, even though we've still got such a long way to go, I think is outstanding. So congratulations.
Oh,
I'm
thank you.
proud. And I've seen you for many years doing your work, and yeah, it's so great that it's been recognised, and I'm sure many other people would agree.
Thank you. And what I've been really pleased about is that, as I said, it's been everyone along the way too that I think needs the recognition. If I can tell you, Bobbi, when I got the email to say I won it, I kept looking for that little thing that says please send money, because I didn't actually. Anyway, I didn't have to send money. I actually got it, which is lovely.
And did
Um,
you click on the link? Because the links are
Yeah, that's
always
right. I didn't press on the link. It was good. Yeah. No, seriously. I mean, yeah. In hindsight, we've come a long way. And I mean, really, not even my 30 years. If you look at when we got the standards and FDR, we're talking like, not even 20 years.
Mm.
And I think that's the difference because, I always joke, and a number of the people that are on there, I know them, that, my standard joke is that, I was doing it when it was getting mixed up with meditation and medication. But reality is that we have come a long way because we were, if you probably were at the beginning too, we were in some relationship Australia, we were some lawyers were doing a little bit dabbling, but it was always seen as something you added on. It wasn't
yeah,
something you could do. So we really are a young profession, and that's what the review did. The AMDRAS, of which I'm involved in, as you know, that was one thing. They wanted us to focus on being the emerging profession that we are.
yeah, absolutely.
Different.
And I think those changes are really timely as well as we move through, and yeah, become not an add-on, but actually a standalone process that is really valued within the law, within the social sciences, all of it. I think is really important.
Yeah,
So, Linda, and when you said about when it was medication and meditation, I know even now sometimes people will say to me, "Oh, Bobbi, meditation." I go, no, it's actually the opposite. There's nothing calm about it.
no enlightenment reached that way, no.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, Linda, can you take us back? Because I know that a lot of people that I talk to are always really interested in, how did it all come about? How did we become, I guess, standalone professionals within this industry? How did we, create our own businesses? Where did we start? What was important? How did it all begin? So can you take us back 31 years and just tell us a snapshot of your story?
Well, back when I started, really the only place you could find mediation was in the family sector. It was seen as being that attached to counselling. It was being sort of funded back in the day, very, very minutely funded. And so the reality is that that's where it started to that's where it started. But it was a difficulty. The difficulty was trying to bring it across from the social science sector, because the reality is that we know, and all the people that I'm seeing the names, and thank you for joining us, is that it is basically can be used, particularly we just talk about straight mediation, go back to the tool. It is a really lifelong learning tool. I think what was difficult was getting that out to a lot of people, because then when I went and started to work at Bond, which was the other highlight, working in the tertiary side of it and working in the training side of it, most of the people that came to the Bond training were lawyers.
Mm.
And so you had this divide between, and I used to sit very uncomfortably being on the picket fence. And it was like that, again, it was seen, while some side wanted to see it grow as a profession, there were some in the legal sector said, no, this is just an add-on. This is just a string to our bow. So I think it's taken a lot of time, and the addition of so many different industries, professions. You and I know, we teach HR, which is inevitably an important place. You do construction, that kind of thing. Education is now one of the growth areas for dispute resolution, as you know.
Yep.
We get so many people who are coming from police, so in law enforcement, that move over to it. So I think it's starting to see that mediation is, you can make it a career, which is great. But if you don't make it a career, it is something you can use and add to your repertoire.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely. They're real life skills, aren't they? The skills that we use as a mediator.
inevitably we talk about that, and I think we forget that. And I think sometimes when you're starting off, I think the biggest thing is for people to really think about what they want to do with their mediation quals, training, whatever. There is that kind of thing, because we know there's a lot of people go, we want to make this our career. And it's not easy to pivot from being a HR consultant to being a full-time mediator. So it's looking at how you transition that as well. I think you've got to think about. It's like any profession, you're not going to get your foot in the door initially, but what are you going to use to advance that? So I
Yeah,
think there's a lot that
springboard it.
goes, behind that, Bobbi. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. And I think too, Linda, you've had quite a varied career. You've worked for some of the not-for-profits. You've worked in the tertiary education side of things. You're on the MSB. So you've had a really varied career. I think that has probably shown you a lot of different ways that mediation can be used. You don't have that level of tunnel vision of just being in a certain industry.
Yeah. A colleague of ours many years ago, because I started off wanting a career, and I am a little ambitious, I'll be honest, occasionally. So I decided as a lawyer, I wasn't going to ever get up to partner status, because I was always doing things like family law and criminal law and working for people, which was wonderful, but I worked out that it wasn't going to get me the money as a commercial lawyer. But I then went to academia, and working in that, I never wanted to be the dean, but I did like to try to, move up. And then it was a colleague of mine, not so long ago, it took me a few years, who said, Linda, you're a lattice, you're not a ladder person.
Mm.
And that was a really interesting thing. And it made me think about my own career, about what I wanted to do. And I think, as a mediator, are you going to be a ladder person, or are you going to be a lattice person? Meaning,
Mm.
you're looking at, becoming, under our new AMDRAS scheme, you become a leading mediator if you've been out a while, and, really focus on growing that. Or are you lattice? Because there's so many things you can do as a mediator. And so
Absolutely.
I think that's what triggered for me, Bobbi, was that kind of thing, was to think about growth in different areas.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love that. I'm just sitting here going, wow, that's a great way to put it. And I think just in my knowing you over the years and our discussions as time's gone on, it's totally lattice. It's almost pretty much just saying yes to things, going, I wonder where that's going to lead. I wonder what it's going to add. And I know that that's something that you do. You just go, okay, which is not necessarily climbing the ladder. It's just extending everything and making it really broad.
Yeah, and I think that's what we need to think about as being mediators is about, as I said, I think the key there for me has always been about what do you want to do with your mediation. Now, sometimes people say they want to be a full-time mediator, and that's a wonderful career, but it's also a career you have to get support with because being a full-time mediator and doing that 5 days a week, well, not necessarily, but doing that as it's burnout material, particularly if you're dabbling in the relationship type mediation like family. And we've seen that, you and I, Bobbi, from people that become FDRPs, particularly in organizations, that can be very fulfilling, but it can also be very exhausting. And there you go. That's the end of it. Whereas I think nowadays, and that's the beauty, it's a bit like when I became a lawyer, slightly transgression. I didn't want to be a lawyer. Halfway through my law degree, I'm thinking, oh, I don't know if I want to do this. I remember going to a careers counselor at university who said I had two choices: practice or edit law books. Both weren't appealing at the time, I can tell you. But it's a bit like, I think, mediation. People just think, oh, I'll become a mediator. But you can become a lot of things and we've seen that now, not only with the training and the coaching, and there's a lot of our colleagues that come on board and coach, and I think that provides a balance, but also looking at the difference now. We have a number of colleagues that work in the restorative justice, for example. We have a number of people that doing collaborative law on a different level. We have a number of people that are doing conflict coaching, parental coordination. Whilst these are all, the things that are coming out, I'm a great believer they all come back from the mediation. They all start as a mediator. You need that basic philosophy, you need that basic outlook, you need that basic kind of thing, and then decide where you want to go. So that if you do want to be a full-time mediator, you've got to work out what are the pros of that, what are the cons of that, and how you get supported. Yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think that support that you talk about is so important. Myself, like you, Linda, we've done the hard yards in the not-for-profits where you've got 5 contact hours a day or whatever it may be, depending on the flavour of the month, and having those back-to-back clients every day is really hard work, but they also have the supports built into it where you get regular supervision. You have people that you can walk out and debrief with. But as sole practitioners, when we do mediate, it's a lonely world out there, isn't it?
Oh yeah, and I mean, I think I think there's the expectation, and I'm going to say this, and people know that I'm fairly candid, that those who go do a full day mediation, that I know people offer that, and that's great, but you've got to think how you can sustain that. What kind of thing can and I'm not saying you make mistakes, but if you are tired, if you're not running on that, and particularly and if you're doing family, we know people have a propensity to actually not complain because they want to complain, but we're dealing with human emotions. And if things go off the track a little bit, what's the first thing to happen? They're going to be Teflon and put it against the mediator. So you need to, all those things. And being a private practitioner is not easy. It's not easy getting into being a private practitioner, and I don't think it's easy staying a private practitioner.
Absolutely. And I think, Linda, what you're saying is completely correct. And I always think about it, and when I'm doing training, talk about when I do a long mediation, my brain is on the whole time.
Yeah.
Like everything that comes out of my mouth is filtered. Everything that comes out of my mouth is strategic. Not for 1 second can you relax. The moment that you relax, you could lose your impartiality, breach confidentiality, step outside your role, all of those types of things. And so the long mediations are really difficult to do and be on for that period of time and then still function in life and have that balance. So what are some of the tips that you think are really important for mediators to be able to, I guess, have some longevity in their careers?
Yeah. I think, look, I mean, again, it's just a personal thing. I think I always say that, particularly if you're going to go in the family sector, and I know some of the people on are involved in that, is that basically it's always, if you can get maybe not a full-time job, but can get some foot in the door into a government-funded organization, purely just to get that, what you were saying, Bobbi, the support, the structure, getting an idea of how you will deal with family violence or vulnerable parties or whatever, being able to do that. If you've got only NEMAS or AMDRAS, I've got to keep reminding myself to move to that name. The community sectors, a lot of the community legal centers do pro bono now. They're much more, and that you can get that kind of thing. Being involved in that kind of that level of where there's support, where there's a structure, where there's safety all covered. Even if you only dabble in there for a little while, it gives you that sense. I, I'll do a promotion for AMDRAS. We're hoping that with the new changes, those of us who become leading mediators, which is the highest level, to remain as leading mediators, we have to give back. So we have to do supervision, mentoring. So that's what we're hoping. And so, you know, not tomorrow, but I'm hoping by next, 2025, there'll be a list of leading mediators that young mediators can, you know, reach out to and say, can I sit with you? Can I? And them saying yes. That's where I think we've lacked a bit of continuity, is getting that. In the family sector, that's easy, not easy, but you can get into a community base, and that gives you, if you're just, not just, but if you've just completed NEMAS or AMDRAS and going into the corporate, or not in the corporate, but doing general mediation, that's where I think the support's been lacking, and hopefully that will give it. Because that's what I think you and I were lucky, as we discussed, was we had that structure. When you go out, it really is about finding a mentor, somebody you can talk to. I'm not talking about having structured supervision once a week and talking about what articles you've read and whatever. Look, I'm sorry for that. Some people, that's probably really important. But I think the bare minimum for us is that you've got someone to have on the other end of the phone to go, geez, that wasn't fun.
Mm.
Because unless you can do that, and that's, for those of us who are lawyers, and I can see as some of the lawyers are on, that's what we were always, that's been missing. I think it's becoming a little bit more in our legal career. But, you in the social science sector have been lucky. You've always had that kind of mentality that you have to have supervision, as they call it. Perhaps, as our colleague Mika Brandon likes to call it, mentoring rather than supervision, I think makes sense. And so there's a whole complexity that you need to do. And I think the other thing for me, and I've probably forgotten the question, is that, you've got to think about, as I said, it comes back to where you want to head, and be strategic about it. You can't just go in and do a NEMAS course and expect to open up a mediation service in 3 weeks. Ain't gonna happen. But you need to plan it. And we've had some very successful students that have opened their own business now, that are parts of really, really high powered in, you know, chambers of commerce, they're all, and promoting the mediation. So that's the good news, that, when you and I, Bobbi, started, I used to joke, don't give up your day job and keep your second job, because becoming a private mediator was probably not something that you could do easily. I'm not saying it's easy, but it's being done, because there's people banding together, and there's private mediations, or you can go on a number of panels of private, or there's a number of options now you can do if you just knock on a few doors. And if you're like our friend Tom Zadorko, prepared to have coffee, you can make the connections, because we are a collegiate group in that way.
And I think too, as you'd mentioned, the difference between, say, the law industry and the social science industry, where in the social science industry, even being vulnerable as a practitioner is accepted and kind of normal. And I don't think it's as accepted in the law industry, which I think is why sometimes it's a little bit more difficult for people to get that, I guess, mentorship during the process of their learning, because when people are lawyers, it's often about, it's got to be perfect, it's got to be right, and you can't have it any other way, which is fair in that industry. But I think as mediators, normalizing the fact that, you know what, it's really hard, you're never going to get it right. You can only be a human for certain parts of the time. I think that there has to be that level of vulnerability. Would you agree?
Oh, I think so. And I think the uniqueness, I think the other thing for me, Bobbi, if I can be honest, is I think we really sit in a unique position. I mean, as a lawyer, when I was a lawyer, my support was, did you make budget, and what your court cases look like next week? And let's go have a drink after work on a Friday. Whereas in working in the social science sector, when I started, it was like, if somebody asked me how I was feeling one more time, I'm going to put a fork in my eye, because it was a whole different. And I think there's a different kind of mechanisms and organisms that are working behind that kind of thing. And we don't sit, I don't think, with respect, I don't think as mediators we sit with the lawyers that comfortably, if we're truthful about it, because how many people we've trained who've said, I can't take the lawyer hat, I can't take that off. But if I've got to be fair, some counsellors, psychologists are just as directive, just
Mm.
as problem solvers. And so for a lot of us, we don't sit comfortably there. So we've had to find our own road, as I've said it. And we are just doing that now. I
Yeah.
mean, thank goodness I've made it to when we're doing that. But our young mediators who are coming through, who are sticking at it and who are going to do it, they're going to lead the way. They're going to be the ones that, you know, take us into the next, next phase. And I think that's really important. You know, you've been one of the lucky ones. You've been able to make your career and a good career out of being a private practitioner. But would you have said, I'm throwing it back on you, that probably wouldn't have been viable 10, 15 years ago with any stretch of the imagination.
Absolutely. And I think and not to make it about me, but I think when I went from the not-for-profits into the private sector, like you, kind of that scaffolding, don't give up your day job. I kept my day job and I did mediation of an evening and then on weekends until I ran out of extra hours.
Yeah.
And then I knew that I could quite safely possibly take the jump. And I did the big leap at that point. But as a social scientist, stepping into the private practitioner world, where it is run mainly by solicitors, where it's run by the law industry, that was a difficult transition because I didn't quite fit initially. Because I didn't have that law training. And then I think after a while, though, people started to accept difference and they saw a different way, which I think is what you're saying about the new practitioners coming through. There's this amazing opportunity where, you know, their studies have changed. Mediation is now something that fits in their study. So they're learning, the lawyers are learning the communication skills of a private practitioner, but also the people in the social sciences are also learning about dispute resolution. So they're learning that level of practicality that comes with it. And it's going to be a beautiful mix. And I'm really excited to see what happens in the next, say, 10 years about where that really fits and these natural practitioners that are going to come through, and we won't see them struggle going, I can't take the hat off. I think we'll have a beautiful blend as time goes on.
Yeah, and look, I agree. I think there is still a bit of a struggle, and I'll say this, and I'm on tape, and I'm happy to defend it. I think there's still a little bit of a struggle between barrister mediators and lawyer and solicitor mediators, and
Yeah.
that's a sad. That's kind of they have that kind of. I'm not saying everywhere, but I know in some jurisdictions there's that bit of a tension and I think again that will come into its own. That will change as well because people, that's the generational change, not only for our teaching, but also for our parties, our participants, whatever you want to call them, clients. They're becoming consumers.
Yeah.
They're actually knowing what or have an idea what this mediation's about, even if they don't know the nuts and bolts. They will see it as if I can go to there, they will, some of them will specifically ask for it. That's the thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think too, having that point of difference as a mediator isn't necessarily a bad thing. When you can, find your niche market and be you in all of that, I think is important as well.
Yeah, and I think, as I said, what's heartening is the number of mediation firms or businesses that are opening up that have a panel of mediators, have, extra child consultants or financial advisors or that kind of thing, that it's becoming the norm, rather, it's becoming acceptable to be a mediation business rather than just a mediator looking touting for business, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. And interestingly, Linda, I'm in a small town at the moment in Victoria, and we went for a walk down the street last night, and there was two mediation businesses advertised in the main street, and I knew both of them. I was like, oh wow, that's so exciting, that the people that we train go off and do these amazing things and bring themselves into the world. It's fantastic.
And I think I've always said regional areas call out for mediators just as much as they call out for doctors and teachers and things like that, maybe
Yeah,
more so. And I think in some way they have a more difficult job because they may know everybody in town. But
yeah.
the whole thing is they have to offer a service because people don't want to go to the big smoke, don't want to, notwithstanding Zoom, mediation has, I still think, has that personal touch that they need to have.
Yeah, definitely. And I guess regional areas as well probably don't have that same level of support that practitioners need as they go through.
But yeah, I remember a story of two of our students from college who didn't know each other. They did it on different years. One was a lawyer and one was a social scientist. They came from a regional town. And I heard from both or one of them, and they connected and they joined up and they created the business.
Yeah.
And so, that's the kind of things you see. And that's the kind of attitude I hope we see, that we're a collegiate profession. Yes, there is work, and we are competing, but it's a bit like, even the training that I've done, the other part of what I got about the training, I've always seen that as collegiate rather than I'm in competition with everybody else, because everybody else likes to learn differently. So it's a bit like there's, room for the different mediators, the room for the different training. I don't understand being territorial and I'm sorry, that's just not me. But because it's all about, at the end of the day, helping the people we need to help and how you best train. Yeah.
And I love that, Linda. And I think myself, you and Robin, we have very similar values in all of that, in that we're pretty much trying desperately to train ourselves out of jobs, by bringing other people into the world. And I have no doubt either that, I won't train myself out of a job, because there is so much work, and the more mediation becomes normalized, the more work there becomes.
Oh, look, yeah, I've always said, sorry, Bobby, I've always said, particularly in FDR, in good times and bad times, families split up. If it's bad times, people are finding a financial difficulty, something. In good times, people are affluent, people are, yeah, but we'll go out and have an affair. We'll go, we will, do different things. And so unfortunately, we'll never be out of work in the family sector, nor are we going to be work in the general sector, because unfortunately, neighbors are always going to have disputes. Workplaces are getting more complex.
Mhm.
And that's a growth area from my point of view, the workplace stuff. We both of you and I have been trained collaboratively in wills and estates and in family. Those kinds of different dispute resolution processes, they're not going to go away because people are wanting them.
Yeah, absolutely. And you think even when COVID hit, tenancy was another one that went through the roof. I know so many mediators who did so well in the area of tenancy that had never even looked into that area before. But with the difficulties with COVID, it just kind of worked.
Yeah, yes. Oh, Bobby's frozen. That's not a good thing. I can talk by myself, but that might be difficult. Oh, you're back. You froze for a moment.
I bet you I froze in a horrible position too.
No,
I
no, it
always.
was very nice. You were quite nice. But yeah, COVID did a lot of things for a lot of people, if we can touch on that, because COVID not wrecked my private practice, but close to it. Because if you remember, Bobby, I started offering online and telephone mediations back in about 2013, when it wasn't trendy to do so, because everybody still thought face to face. But what happened was, since then, COVID came in, and most of us, I'd been training mediators online as well, but we went there, to face to face, and went to Zoom. And I think a lot of our colleagues have stayed, not just offering Zoom, but being at least embracing it. So I always joke, it's left me without an edge. So it's like, what do I do? But yeah, I mean, I think that's the other thing about my time as a mediator, was that seriously about, we could only do it face to face, and you had to leave at least 4 hours, and there was sort of construction around that in terms of that. Where
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think that's the difference. I think we can be adaptable, and I think that's what we need to look at when you do become a mediator. What kind of services you want to offer? Where do where do you think you can have your niche in terms of that, if you want to do that? And we have enough now, a suite of things that we can choose from.
Yeah, absolutely. And I remember back when it all first started with the whole COVID situation, people would be like, "Do you do online?" And I'd be like, "Yeah." Now, no one even asks. Everyone just expects that everything happens online. But and thankfully, Linda, that the rest of the world has finally jumped on board what you're already doing. But it has opened it way up. That I have lawyers that refer to me from all over Australia. I do overseas mediations as well sometimes. Like, it's the world is your oyster now. Again, the lattice, it's just taken a different direction. Hasn't necessarily gone up, but it's gone all over the place.
You see, I think that's a good marketing tool now for people, because people are quite happy to jump on for a half an hour Zoom meeting.
Yep.
Getting up and going. And yes, when we were talking about marketing many years ago, yes, it's good to have a wine and cheese for your lawyers and do that. Yes, it is. It is good to do that. But these days, time is money. So that, if you can have a Zoom meeting and encourage people to come and, be productive and be engaging, you can get really good results from that as well.
Oh, totally. Absolutely. Now, can I just add as well, we've been talking for a little while now, but if anyone's got any questions for Linda or anything, please feel free to pop it in the chat. We would love to have some interaction from you guys as well if you're keen on doing so. Just to let everyone know as well, Linda and I have scripted nothing. We just went, let's just chat about Linda's career and how amazing it has been. So please, I'm just thinking of the things that I'm interested in. So if you've got anything else, please feel free to add it in. So, Linda, just sort of changing topic slightly. So, with the new AMDRAS that's happening and all of those things, what do you think is really important for people to know about that, as well as what that means for their careers and their futures going forward?
Yeah, thank you, Bobbi. That's a bit of a free ad for AMDRAS. Some people may have been, and I think I'm doing an AMDRAS one for our webinar series anyway, to be put up in our portal. But first thing I want to say to people is that the reaction is, what happens to me? Well, nothing. As in, you will all be rolled over and become AMDRAS accredited mediators. It is then up to you and to decide once you're okay, let's give you some acronyms and really confuse you. The older RMABs are not RMABs anymore. They are going to know as RAPs, which is probably easier. Recognized accreditation providers, and our little organization, Bobbi, is going to be recognized training provider. So once the RAPs say we're going AMDRAS, you'll all just become accredited mediators. Now, some of you may just stay that way, and there is going to be talk that even if you're non-practicing, you can have a certificate to recognize that. But what we found when we reviewed it was that people wanted to show growth and wanted to, if they were going to be part of a profession, graduation, ladder part in the profession. So the next one's an advanced mediator. Now, advanced mediator, you have to have 4 years experience and have done so many hours. I think it's 150 hours off the top of my head. AMDRAS is sort of ingrained, but not ingrained, as you can imagine. And then you've got to do a practicum certificate, which people go, great, another workshop we've got to pay for, really? Now, this is really exciting because it really is what we've just been talking about. You bring a case to the workshop with up to 12 or 18 other people, 11 or 17 other people, and you present your cases and you workshop what you would have done differently, how you would have done it. You may do a role play, person that you work with, and the instructors, we have said, have to be of at least 8 years standing. So, it's not going to be someone who's just out. So it's going to be the Bobbis, the Robins, the, people that people that we hold in high regard, because they've got to be very experienced mediators in that way. So you can become what we call an advanced mediator, which may help your career, may not, whatever. However, if you're doing mediations, like Bobbi and Robin and a couple of my colleagues, you can apply to become a leading mediator. Now, a leading mediator is the top. And again, you've got to have done at least 4 years, posted a number of hours. But that's the one I was mentioning, that when you reaccredit to become, you get ticked off. And I think, I can't speak for all the RAPs, but I would imagine there's grandfathering clauses and things like that for, moving forward. But when you go for when you go for reaccreditation, you have to show that you've kept your practice hours up and your CPD, but you're mentoring. There's got to be a shot of mentoring. So there's that pathway. The other one, not to confuse, is standing in parallel, is that we're saying we recognize that there are specialist dispute resolution practitioners out there. Communities of mediators who are doing things like, clearly we see FDRPs as being a specialist group. I know you already get that accredited. We all get that under the AGs, but it'd be nice to have that we're trying to bring them that. Certainly conciliators. We're talking about our own country mediators, restorative justice mediators. I've had all sorts of people like parental coordinators, collaborative mediators or coaches. And the good news or the bad news is that we at AMDRAS, and I'm only there till November, but we at AMDRAS are not going to be dictatorial. It is going to be these communities who have to go, we believe there are enough of us and we want to get recognition, and here's our criteria. So we've tried to give it back to our community to say, if you are strongly believe that what you do deserves another tick and another little stamp, we're not going to stand in your way, but we're not going to dictate what it looks like because we don't know. Some of us are FDRPs on but so I think this is the next stage of becoming a profession, Bobbi, in that way, if that makes any sense. The other thing that's changing is the training, which a lot of you won't worry about, but you may need to think about it if you let your accreditation lapse, because there will be things like the assessments changing. Those of you you've all done an hour and a half if you've done NEMAS. No questions asked. You just do it and hopefully got through. By this time next year, everybody will be doing 2-hour assessments as plus doing a written assessment. So I suppose a word to the wise is don't let your accreditation lapse, because I think the RAPs, the RAPs, and will ask for that. So people are sort of coming at us and saying, oh, and the other big thing is that for the RAPs and for mediators, they should look at is the complaint procedure. We have made sure there's consistent complaint procedure across the RAP. Not because we say there's lots of complaints, but saying that complaints that get to us at board level, we'd like them to be consistent. So we'd like them to be able to tick boxes. Happy to answer any questions or concerns about AMDRAS if you do have it. But the good news is you don't have to do anything. Your RMAB RAP will roll you over, and then you need to make a decision where you are in your career, whether you want to apply.
I think, and having gone through a previous transition, Linda, for FDRPs, where we went from 10 hours of practice to 50 hours of practice. Remember those days? So anyone who's not an FDRP, when you first did the course back years ago, you had to do 10 practical hours that were supervised, and then they changed it to 50. And that became a big thing for people who were going for FDR. However, I really think that it has added so much value to the level of professionalism, the level of experience that FDRPs have before they go out into the world. And I think that these AMDRAS changes are going to be so positive for the industry. Longer assessments to be able to know that you're doing it well, to be able to hit the ground running when you go out and become a mediator. With that added extra, even the length of time that you now have to train in your courses, to be able to get accreditation, to be able to go for the assessment, all of those things I think are only going to add value to the way forward. So I'm really excited about the changes that they're making. And I think as a professional, me being able to use my tenure in such a way, in a really positive way, to work towards something, I think is really important as well. Because prior to that, I've been a mediator for 18 years or something like that, but I'm on the same level as somebody who has started yesterday.
Yeah, and that's what we want. I think we need recognition. But the other thing I should mention is those of you who just want, not just, but who would like to just be an accredited mediator, because that's just a string to your bow.
Yep.
The good news is that we've dropped the hours in reaccreditation. They only have to do 20 hours of practice, and 5 of those can be intake, because that was the other thing that was never clear. So the whole thing is that, let's be honest, intake's easy to get, because a lot of intakes don't turn into mediations, unfortunately. And if we're looking at 15 hours of mediation every 2 years, for those of you who do all-day mediation, that's 2 mediations, 1 a year. So if you can't manage that or co-mediate with someone, if you can't get that, perhaps you need to think about, is this something you want to keep going? But as I said, hopefully, maybe not next year, but maybe 2026, there's going to be, mediators. And look, there'll be a demand and people may have to pay. So I don't know, that's them. But leading mediators who say, because they want to stay leading mediators, say, I offer 3 co-mediations a year, that kind of thing. So hopefully that will permeate, because what we're seeing at the moment, Bobbi, is an interesting phenomenon, which is not that interesting. Well, it is from our point of view, that, roughly the mediation, we get about 3,800 accredited mediators a year. That stays fairly consistent. You and I know we've trained heaps across where we train. So, probably we probably train about, not just us, but across the training would probably be a few hundred, couple of hundred at least. Because I think we're, college and with GTBD is probably 150 across the board, quite easy. So if you triple that with there's about 300, 400 coming in. But that means there's 300 or 400 people that are not reaccrediting. And that's what we want to stop. We want the growth. And so make it easy to people to stay as a accredited mediator, even if they're not practicing or they're just on the accredited level. We try to make that, because then we don't lose people to the profession as well.
And I think some feedback that I always have from mediators that aren't doing it, I guess, at a full-time sort of basis, they've got another job and it's, their added thing that they like. Because they're not fully in the industry, it's hard for them to get referrals. It's hard for them to even get sent the work, because a lot of times with mediation, it's people referring clients to you. It's, it's not necessarily you advertising or anything like that. So I think for those people, that's really difficult. So having that sort of springboard to be able to keep them in the industry, so that again, in the future, they've got options. They might go, you know what, I want to change professions and I've got this one sitting there. I'm going to go full steam ahead or even it out. Or I think it's a wonderful idea.
Well, I think also what happens a lot of the time is that life happens. Now, what I mean by that is that people become accredited as mediators, and then I'll hear from them in a couple of years saying, look, I fell pregnant, or, my mother got a serious illness, or I got transferred to someone and I haven't been able to keep it up. And so for a lot of them, it's easier just to go, I won't so we don't want those people who, then to get back into it might have to redo a course and all of that. And that's time, that's money, and that's resources, and we respect that. Being able to have an option where they can continue in a way that may not be exactly what they're thinking, but at least hold on to something so they can, as you say, springboard. I think that's what we're trying to do.
And as hopefully one day a leading mediator, I know from my perspective in private practice, having clients allow a new mediator to participate, or a mediator who isn't as experienced, is sometimes quite difficult. But I think if it was, I'm recognised as a leading mediator and part of my role is, I think people would be quite okay with that. It adds a level of, I guess, genuineness to somebody else being present in the mediation, which clients I think would accept and be quite happy to have. So I think, it makes it a little bit more legitimate, I believe.
I agree. And I think there's a double edge to that, because of course, if you can stick leading mediator on your letterhead, that's going to make people who are looking for mediators, and like for the RAPs, they're going to probably have to have their leading mediator list, their advanced, and their accredited, so people can shop a little bit, or that kind of thing. And so, part of your opening statement, or part of your admin, is exactly that. Hi, my name's Linda Kochanski, and I'm a leading mediator. Part of my role is that I have to give back 3 times a year. Are you okay? It's a bit like what we did, I don't know about when you worked for RA, but we were sort of basically taught, or I was basically taught to opt out of it. I hated videos. That, basically it was that unless the parties said no,
it was happening.
You got them to sign consents. I hated it. Did you hate video? I hated the video.
Hated it.
I had to watch it 3 times. One to say that, God, I'm going to lose weight. Second time was to see what I was wearing. Third time I'd go, oh, that's what I did. So I hated it because I had to watch everything 3 times. It was awful.
For me, it was 4 times. The other one, I was focused on my bad language, as in, hey, you guys.
Okay, all right. Yep. No, maybe I coupled that with what I was dressing. I don't know, but what I was dressed in. But so I suppose that's the other way. And I mean, those of the that will not differentiate, but people that want to be leading mediators have to recognize that that's a responsibility, giving back to the profession.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I think it's so important. Yeah. And hopefully that will also make other people strive to become leading mediators as well.
That's what
yeah, so exciting.
See, we did get a bit of pushback on that because it's a bit confusing and people, but it's interesting because it was one of the things that come out of the review, which took 2 years to do, so it wasn't done overnight. And the review actually came back with 4 levels. And we went, oh, okay, that's confusing. No, thank you. We'll just keep it 3 levels and have the separation. And I think, you know, we can't have it both ways. We can't just be, you know, just go in for a couple of days and get trained and put a shingle up. Those
Yeah.
days are long gone. You know, and we know that, well, I know and you know that when people do assessments, we're serious about that to begin with.
Yeah.
All we've done is to put a bit more of a framework so people are very well that it's a 45-hour, which is, you know, now a 6-day course, which we did have to take into consideration, you know, commercially, but at the end of the day, 38 hours wasn't cutting it in terms of, I lost the battle to make intake accessible. I lost that battle, and I admit that, but it's still very much important, has to be covered. And so giving us an extra 8 hours, we can do a bit more work around intake and things like that.
Mm. And I think that that extra time as well in the training allows an opportunity to grow confidence. I think new mediators sometimes go, oh gosh, it's all quite overwhelming, which may be why some of them sort of disappear and don't go forward. But having that little bit of extra support right at the very beginning will hopefully help people to want to stay in the industry and want to keep growing and feel confident about what they're doing.
Yeah, and look, I think, you know, I'll say to this everyone on that, look, you know, if you have a spare time, money, or you know, offer your services to be a role player on one of the new, you know,
Mm.
in your where you come back to. You know, I know I always say that, and you know, but you know, if you are still sort of finding your feet, you know, if you have got the time and disposition, you know, whatever, you know, whether you were trained by us or by AMA or by RI or college or Bond or whoever, you know, reach out to them, because the whole thing is that you can learn a lot, and the new courses may be something you can negotiate to, you know,
Mm.
I mean, we were, we had already not, we didn't know what AMDRAS was going to bring, but when we created ours, we decided 6 days would have to be it, didn't we, Bobbi?
Yeah,
Because
we
we've
did.
got so much to cover in it. So we've the good news is we don't have to do a lot of work, just have to
Perfect.
change EMAS to AMDRAS, but I know that can be a barrier to people thinking I've got to do 6 days, but you can do 6 days online. You know, we've offered you can do 3 days face to face, then 3 days online. Doesn't have to be all done in the same week. That doesn't change. And at AMDRAS, you can offer it in a number of ways.
Yeah, yeah, and when we put it all together with GTPD, I think that was one of the things that we were thinking about, is that level of confidence for new practitioners to go out into the world with is so important, because it's hard, and I think if you get that one rocky mediation, I don't know about you, Linda, but you get that one rocky mediation and you kind of walk away going, oh, what am I doing? Should I be doing this? Am I? And I still get that after 18 years. I sometimes drive home in the car going, I don't know if I'm suited for this. And then the next day I'll have an amazing mediation and go, oh, that's why I go to work every day. But I think if, you know, that only having, say, 5 days of training as opposed to 6, can have sometimes a negative impact on people as well.
Exactly. But you
Yeah.
just have to look at it, the commitment, but you know, that's
Yeah.
but anyway, so that's
Yeah.
AMDRAS. We're in transition. That's the other thing I want everyone to say, that it's, you know, don't panic if you haven't heard anything from your IRP, because they have until the 1st of July next year officially.
Yeah, yeah. And everything's changing in the background. We're all having meetings and everything like that to make sure everyone's aware of what they need to do. So there's stuff going on in the background. So if you haven't heard anything, don't panic. You definitely will hear in due course. So Linda, we're nearly out of time and everyone's obviously on their lunch break, which is fantastic. Thank you for taking the time. Can you talk to us a little bit about what your future is going to look like? I know that you're on the MSB until November.
Yes, that's
Um, yeah. So what are you thinking goes on after that? Where are you headed? Because obviously we all want to follow, um, whether we follow you literally or just in our careers, you know, whatever. You know, I'm sure there's a lot of girl crushes going on in the background. Um, where are you headed? Where do we keep our eyes open for you?
Well, I suppose, to be honest, yeah, the MSB AMDRAS has been a big commitment, particularly this year when I wasn't supposed to be there and they asked me back, and that was lovely of them, and I said yes, which is, again, as you say, I say yes. Okay, for me, I'm hoping for example, and this is not just because we're on, I now can give more time to GTPD.
Yeah.
I've been there in the background, but you know, you and Robin have been there, particularly yourself. I'd like to give more time to that and reach out to the community. You know, the other thing that I'm looking for is probably getting excited about different aspects of the mediation world. You know, collaborative law, for example, and our role in that and how that can mean. The other probably area that I will look at is the training, looking at the training and looking at how we can improve. And probably, if I'm possibly honest, do something quite completely different when I have time. I've always wanted to be a Brisbane greeter. For those of you know, yes, that's something Bobbi didn't know. I can see by her face. She's gone, what? Yeah, I know in Brisbane they wear red t-shirts and they greet people and they show them around the city. And my kids have always said I'd make a great Brisbane greeter. And so if I could have,
I agree. I think I can see that. Absolutely.
so yeah, I look, probably what I'd like to do is not leave AMDRAS, is to make sure that from my side of the fence that AMDRAS is secure, that we're
Yeah.
moving forward. And so that's working with the organizations that I work with, that, you know, to make sure that is. It's to bring community to GTPD. I think I really would like us to, don't know how we're going to do it, Bobbi. We'll talk about it, but I'd like our members to be, we'd have the lunch with Learn's lovely, but maybe have lunch with them. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? Yeah, individual. I think we need to remember we're a community and bring them on with that. So
Yeah.
basically, I'm not going to be, you know, once I leave the MSB, I'll have some free time. But, you know, it's also deciding at the end of the day, this sounds old, what's my legacy? My legacy is hopefully that, you know, I've trained so many, but I've left a community that feels strong, that it's moving forward. That's what I'd like.
And I think, Linda, that is why you got your AM. I think that level of passion that you have for the mediation world and for us mediators as well. I feel so proud of the fact that I've had you in my experience as a mediator, as well as a friend and a business colleague and all the rest of it. But for me, even, you know, when you're going to have a little bit more free time because you've done some really hard work on the MSB, and to step back a little bit, but still, you know, use the lattice to work out where you're going to go and to make sure that everything is left securely for the up and coming generations of mediators, I think is just amazing. And I have no doubt that the legacy that you will leave one day, in the very distant future, will be one that is absolutely amazing, and one that you should be so proud of. So congratulations, Linda. Yeah, I'm sure that everybody on board watching would say the exact same. I can't imagine a more deserving person when it comes to contributing to the mediation world than you to receive this. So yeah, well done.
Look, I was surprised. I'm very thankful. And my only other excitement is I don't do a lot of social media, but I got 150 likes and 80 comments on LinkedIn. So my daughter, oh, Mum, you're so, yeah, no.
You're
But
trending.
all I want to say, I'll let you all go, but thank you, because a lot of these people names were people that I trained, that are people I know, people I've mediated with. They're the ones that also, that's why I love this profession, is that I've never come across a nasty, vindictive mediator, that kind of thing, because it is really about being supported, and that's the thing. We need to move forward because we're doing hard work, so we need the support. So thank you. Thank you, Bobbi, for the opportunity to have a chat. It's lovely to have a chat in a different forum. There, but all good.
Yeah, lovely, thank you. And there's a lot of congratulations messages coming up, Linda, that I'm sure that you can see as well.
Thank you so much. Thank you,
and
everyone.
I have no doubt everyone who's on here has had some connection of you in the training world or in the mentoring world, or, you know, through all of the work that you've done. So yeah, you've been wonderful for the industry and will continue to do so, I have no doubt.
Thank you. And look, everyone, enjoy the rest of your week, and thank you for very much. And thank you, Bobbi, for having us, for having
Thank you, Linda.
I talk in the third person. Thanks so much. Have a lovely week, everyone. I'll stop the recording now as well. See ya.
Yeah, lovely. Thank you all.